Hello students, so in this video we will be discussing important current affairs related to VPC, Virtual Private Cloud. The session will be quite interesting, so stay tuned till the end. First question asked here is, a company has a VPC with a CIDR block of 10.0.0.0/16. The company wants to create a new subnet for a development team with a CIDR block of 10.0.1.0/24. Which of the following statement is true about the new subnet? If we look at the questions here, so first thing you need to know that the new subnet has a CIDR block of 10.0.1.0/24. This is a private IP range, correct? And the VPC CIDR block, that is 10.0.0.0/16, this is a larger range that will include this new subnet, correct? And the new subnet, it will not overlap with the existing VPIC CIDR block. The new subnet will not require a separate internet gateway, right, as it can use the existing internet gateway of this VPC. Also, the new subnet is not a public subnet as it is not directly accessible from the internet. So this new subnet is a private subnet. Next is, a company has a VPC with two subnets, that is subnet A this and subnet B this. The company wants to allow instances in subnet A to communicate with the instances in B. Which of the following is the requirement for this communication? So in order to communicate between this subnet and subnet B, a route table with a route to subnet B will be required. So option A is right. That means a route table with a route to this subnet B will be required. Take a note of this, important, correct? This route table with a route to the subnet B is required to enable communication between these two, and a security group will allow the inbound traffic from subnet A is not required. I repeat, a security group that allows inbound traffic from subnet A is not required. Why? Because the security group controls the inbound traffic to instances and not communication between these subnets, correct? I repeat, why the security group here will not be required for this inbound traffic for subnet A? Because this is a subnet and these security groups, they are required for the instances and not for your subnet, correct? Apart from this, a network ACL will allow the outbound traffic from subnet A is also not required for the same reason, correct? This ACL traffic is this network ACLs controls the traffic at subnet level, correct, at instance level and not at between the subnets. I repeat again this, that the network ACL, this network ACL will also be not required at subnet A. Why? Because this will control the traffic at subnet level and not between the subnet A and subnet B, correct? And also an internet gateway is attached to subnet A is not required. Why? This is for communication with the internet and not between these subnets. So what is required is just a route table, no security group is required, no network ACL and no internet gateway is required here. Just a route table that will help us to communicate to route B or subnet B. Next is, a company has a VPC with a subnet, as you can see here, and an instance with a public address. The company wants to allow incoming HTTP traffic to instances from the internet. Which of the following requirement is for this communication, right? That means we have a subnet and an instance with an IP. The company wants to allow the incoming HTTP traffic to the instance from the internet, right? So what will be required here, right? A security group that will allow the inbound HTTP traffic will be required here, and a security group is required to control the inbound traffic to instances, because we have this instance and in last question we saw between the subnets it is not required security group, but for the instances the security group is required, so a security group will be required here. Apart from this, a network ACL that will allow the inbound HTTP traffic is also not required, because this will network ACL, this will control the traffic at your subnet level, not between the subnets but at the subnet level, also not between the individual instances. Then a route table with a route to the internet. See, route table is also not required because an instance already has this IP address, so no route table will be required here. Fourth option, an internet gateway attached to the subnet. It is also not required, but it is not the only requirement for the incoming traffic, right? So internet gateway, we know this. Internet gateway is not the only requirement. It may be attached to the subnet is required, because from subnet we will be using this internet gateway to connect to the internet, but it is not the only requirement for the incoming traffic. But a security group will be definitely required here. Next, a company has a VPC with two availability zones, that is this and this. The company wants to create a subnet in each AZ availability zones. Which of the following is required for this configuration? See, which of the following is required here? What is asked is there that the company wants to create a subnet in each availability zone, right? Which of the following is required? So we have to create a separate subnet for each availability zone, right? So right option from this becomes a separate VPC for each availability zone will be required here, right? Then the company needs to create a separate subnet in each AZ, and a separate VPC will also be created for each availability zone, correct? Will it be required? No, a separate VPC will not be required for each availability zone, correct? As a single VPC, it can accumulate. In single VPC, we will be seeing that multiple availability zones can be there. So no different VPC is required. Apart from this, an internet gateway for each of these availability zone, will it be required? No, it won't be required, because a single internet gateway can be used with this VPC that contains all these availability zones. Then comes a separate route table for each is required. No, because a single route table can be used that will be using these multiple availability zones. Next, a company has a VPC with a subnet this and an instance with a private IP address. The company wants to now in instance to access the internet. Which of the following will be required? So VPC with a subnet this and a private IP address instance is there. So now in order to access the internet, we will be requiring a net gateway. We will be requiring this net gateway to enable the outbound internet access for the instances within the private IP address, correct? And instance, no, instance won't be required because it is an older technology and now it has been replaced by this net gateway. And internet gateway is not required because it will be used for the incoming internet traffic but not the outgoing internet traffic, correct? Take a note of this, because see, this instance question asked is this instance want to access the internet, so the incoming traffic will be going outside because we want to access something outside. So this internet gateway is used for inbound traffic, that is the internet is sending the data inside this VPC. Now what we are doing, we are accessing from inside to outside, that is your outbound. So for outbound we will be requiring a net gateway, but if it is asked that for inside inbound traffic, then we will be requiring internet gateway. And VPN connection is not required as it is not for internet access, right? It is just for changing your IP address and location. Next, a company has a VPC with a subnet this and an instance with a public IP. The company wants to restrict the incoming traffic to an instance from a specific IP address. Which of the following will be required here? So in order to restrict incoming traffic to the instance from a specific IP range, what will be required here? A security group will be required that will allow the inbound traffic from the specific IP address range only, and the one that we want to block will be blocked from this security group. Network ACL, see, it won't be required as network ACLs controls the traffic at subnet level. We have discussed this multiple times that these network ACLs, they control the traffic at the subnet level, not to individual instances. Then if we talk about route table, it won't be required as the instance already has a public IP address. Route tables are required when there is a private IP address and then we want to access, correct? Then internet gateway as we saw is not required as internet gateways are used for communication with the internet and not restricting the incoming traffic. So it is for communicating with the internet. Next, A company has a VPC with two subnets, subnet A and subnet B. The company wants to allow the instance in subnet A to communicate with the instance in subnet B. Which of the following is for the communication? We have seen this question. This is a repeated question. So right option is option A. So students, that's all for the day. I hope the session was interesting and you have learned multiple questions here. Correct? And one more question. Let me do one more question. The question is, the company has a VPC with a subnet this and an instance with a private IP address. The company wants to allow the instance to access an S3 bucket. Which of the following is required for this communication? So in order to access a S3 bucket, a VPC endpoint will be required here, right? This VPC endpoint is required to enable the private access to S3 buckets from an instance from a private IP address. NAT gateway won't be required. As why? Because it is used for the outbound internet access. NAT instance won't be required here, as it is an older technology replaced by gateway, and internet gateway, it is used for inbound internet access. Correct? So right option here is VPC endpoint will be required if we have a subnet and we have an instance with a private IP address and we want that instance to enable S3 bucket. Correct? So this instance needs a VPC endpoint to access this S3 bucket. So these were your important questions, friends. Stay tuned with us. We will be discussing more such questions daily on this platform.